There's something magical when a film goes through a projector, the beam of light.
That's what Psycho was based on.
This is a shot from Hitchcock.
The camera always sees the truth.
Fantastic.
I'm going to watch films from throughout your career.
Rod Steiger played a key part in the revolution in American screen acting of the 1950s. He played Marlon Brando's brother in On the Waterfront, and their scene in the back of a taxi became one of the most famous in American cinema.
Listen to me, Terry. Take the job, just take it. No questions, take it.
He gave Oscar-nominated performances, which led one critic to write, "He's so powerful, he just doesn't fit into ordinary roles." One of his directors said, "He's an explosion. How do you direct an explosion?"
Just once in my life, I'm going to hold my temper.
The rage and loneliness in Steiger's performances seemed to stem from his childhood.
Boo!
He was born in New Jersey in 1925. His father left when he was still an infant. His mother drank heavily and would disappear for days.
Just looking down into this camera, please.
He was asked to join the celebrated Actors Studio in New York without an audition, a rare honor. This led to a career-changing lead role in the live TV drama Marty, which caught the mood of the early 50s so well.
Well, Marty, when you gonna get married, huh?
In the years to come, he would play Napoleon, Mussolini, the Pope, Rasputin, Pontius Pilate in the television series Jesus of Nazareth, and give cinema's best gangster performance as Al Capone.
Which chair do you want me in?
Well, I'd like you beside the screen. Throughout the 60s, he was still ahead of his time, daring to be repulsive and morally serious in a way that Robert De Niro would do a decade later. Do you need some powder or anything?
No.
Steiger married 4 times. His Oscar for In the Heat of the Night in 1968 turned him from character actor to leading man.
It's in colour?
It's in colour. He was as passionate as ever about acting, but many found him ludicrous in parts such as the priest in the Amityville Horror. It's no surprise to hear that Steiger admires the painter Vincent van Gogh, because in a way he is the Van Gogh of actors, immensely expressive and sometimes anguished and not fully appreciated. Here he is to talk about his life and work, the most in-depth interview he's given on television. Rod Steiger, you've been an actor for 50 years.
Yeah.
Is it a good job?
Well, yes, I think for me it's a good job, because I was one of those, when I was younger, I had the romantic idea that one must be free, you know. And I remember in the 50s, everybody went to see a psychiatrist, because if you didn't go, you were sick, right? It was the fad. And so I remember I went to see this analyst, and I said, look, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know if I belong here, but I just have to tell you, I have to be free to do what I want. I have to be free to get up what I want. I have to be free to do everything, anything I can have now. I must be free. I must have freedom. And he said to me, one of the lines that changed my life, he said, you be careful, or you'll become a slave to freedom. And I said, what time's the next visit? I mean, what else could I say? No.
And this idea of freedom was an important theme in On the Waterfront, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And in the controversy around its director, Kazan, testifying to McCarthy.
Elia Kazan, I have no respect for at all anymore, because he sold his friends in Washington to protect his career, and he was already a millionaire in the theater. I mean, there was no excuse of a starving family or anything. But he said, well, you go to Bud Schulberg, that's the writer. He wrote a script called On the Waterfront. You read the taxi scene with him, and if he likes you, you can play Marlon Brando's brother. Well, I almost fell on the floor, because this is some colleague to work with, you know. It's almost a love scene between 2 brothers. I don't mean sexually, but it's just, even though one is doing something wrong, it's still your brother. Charlie is the weaker one. He fell in love with luxury and the ladies, and he kind of sold himself. And sooner or later, he didn't realize it, but it brought him in direct opposition to his brother. And the rest more or less is history. And then sometimes I feel if I see the taxi scene one more time, I'll shoot myself, you know, because this scene has become identified as one of the supposedly great scenes in cinema or something.
Well, I hope you don't have a gun, because here it comes, the taxi scene.
I had a hunch it might sneak in. I didn't know.
Before we get to
Listen to me, Terry. Take the job, just take it. No questions, take it. Terry, take this job, please.
Charlie.
Please take it.
Charlie. Oh, Charlie. Wow.
Look here, Look here, Dave. How much you weigh, Slipper? When you weighed 168 pounds, you were beautiful. You could have been another Billy Conn. That skunk we got you for the manager, he brought you along too fast.
It wasn't him, Charlie. It was you. You remember that night in the garden, you came down my dressing room and said, "Kid, this ain't your night. We're going for the price on Wilson." You remember that? This ain't your night. My night? I could have taken Wilson apart. So what happens? He gets the title shot outdoors in a ballpark, and what do I get? A one-way ticket to Palookaville. You was my brother, Charlie. You should have looked out for me a little bit.
You see the Venetian blind?
Yeah.
That wasn't there when we walked on the set. Kazan is saying, how the hell can I shoot the scene if you can see through the back of the cab and 5 feet away is the wall of the studio? You were supposed to get a back projection. And the thing that saved us, one of the working men said, you know, I came to work in a cab that had a Venetian blind. And Kazan, who's no fool, said, get me a bloody Venetian blind. And they put that in, and we shot the scene. And the other thing is, it forced them to stay in close, so the scene basically depended upon the two actors. Also, it added attention for the actors. I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, but I will, I will, I will, and you do it. We did Brando's close-up, and I was off camera, and when you're off camera working with another actor, you do your nut, you overdo it to help them with reaction. And acting is reacting, so we're very dependent on each other. And that son of a gun went home when it was time for my close-ups. And I never forgot that. It was like a wounding. I couldn't believe a man that talented would walk out. And I had to do my close-up with the stage manager sitting with his script saying, right? So he must have burned his rear end. We came out even in that scene. You know?
Absolutely. And the director of On the Waterfront, as you said before, testified against some of his colleagues to McCarthy. Recently, when this director, Elia Kazan, got his honorary Oscar, you replied to a letter that Charlton Heston wrote.
Oh, yeah.
What did you say in that letter, and why do you continue to be angry with this man?
Well, number one is, here's a man who was, to the actors in New York City, and at one time the best director around in the theater. He was a father figure to us all. He talked about truth, personal identification, and we idolized him. He was the leader. And basically, my father sold his friends so he could stay a millionaire in the theater and direct movies. What happened to that artistic view of life is truth and honesty and compassion.
He said he was on the side of truth, that the communists were trying to take over the group theatre, etc.
Let's go to the end, follow that to the extreme. If all the communists in America at that time, and if there was 100,000, I'll eat it, you think they could have invaded against the American army and taken us over? I mean, it was so ridiculous, and that was his excuse. In his book, he tries to do that too, and it was a terrible time.
Going back, your father left when you were an infant?
Yeah, I never knew him. I never saw. When I was in the theater on stage, I used to think from time to time, what would happen if suddenly this man walked into my dressing room and said, "Hello, Rod, I'm your father." I don't know if I would have beat the bejesus out of him or broke down and cried. You know, every once in a while I was thinking,
Maybe both.
Well, he knew where I was if he was alive. I mean, my name above the lights on Broadway, you know, and that. So I never knew what happened to him. Yeah.
And your mother was absent in a way as well. She drank a lot, she
later
disappeared.
on, yeah. My mother was a very beautiful woman. She had auburn hair down to here and all that stuff. And she was offered a movie contract because she was that pretty. And then what happened, she got some kind of a disease or something that crippled her right leg. And from being, in quotation marks, near perfection, and suddenly crippled, the drinking increased. She couldn't adjust. And I didn't know where she was. I was living with neighbors and on the streets and stuff like that. And I found her downtown in this terrible, we used to call it a flop house, this terrible place in this rotten bedroom. And she was intoxicated. And I said, you got to sign this paper. Because if you sign this paper, I can get in the Navy now. Obviously, I wanted to get away from all this. And she said, I'm not going to sign it. I said, you sign it, I'll break your arm. And both of us are crying, right? She said, I'm not going to. And I took her arm and I put it in back of her. I said, you sign it. And there we are both. And she signed it, and I literally ran all the way to New York. Oh, I must say one thing. My mother pulled herself out to Alcoholics Anonymous. In the last 11 years of her life, she was wonderful. I learned to love her again. And I have always had respect and admiration that she had the strength in the end to fight for herself, and she won.
You once said the parts that you have played are autocratic people who are their own mothers and fathers, and it made it sound as if you sort of were your own mother and father in a way.
Well, an autocratic personality is somebody who tries to be everything to himself. And so you can be your mother, you can be your father, you can be your provider, you can be your protector, you can be everything. So that was part of my problem for a while and part of my distrust, you know, of people.
And are you still like that? Do you still distrust people?
No, I hope not. I hope not. I would say to a person who has been wounded in the world of reality, is a precious place to live, because nobody's going to hurt me here. Nobody's going to do anything to me here. This is my place, you know.
And you played wounded characters in films such as Oklahoma and Marty.
Yeah.
I've got a scene here from Marty. It's early on in the drama where you make a telephone call asking a girl out. And famously, you forgot the line and you had to improvise slightly. This had an audience of 40 million people. Yeah. And live, of course. Do you remember what it was like to be in front of such a large audience and think, I can't remember the next line?
Yeah, that's a good definition of terror. You say this can't be happening. Everything goes in a split second, you know. But I knew why I was on the phone. That's what goes back. Why am I here? What am I doing? How do I feel about the person I'm talking to? I knew this situation so I could get out of it. But the split second where you get this icy feeling through your body, where you say, "Oh my God, I don't. What do I say?" You don't forget.
Here's the scene.
Come on now, you must remember me. That's right, that's right. Then we went to Howard Johnson, and then we had milkshakes, and we had hamburgers. Yeah, well, I'm the stocky one. That's right. Well, I'm glad you recalled this, because I had a very good time that night, and I was wondering, how's everything with you?
Is that the moment where you forgot?
Yeah.
That's good. That's good, because you see, I called you up because, well, I want to go to movies tonight, and I thought maybe you and a friend of yours would come to movies tonight with me and a friend of mine, you know? Yeah, well, I know it's late. Yeah, but I know it's Saturday night. Yeah, but I couldn't help it because I just thought of it, you know. Well, what are you doing? What are you doing next Saturday? What are you doing the Saturday after that?
He is basically a normal person. He's a very loving person. And I don't know if he got it from his mother, who was rather dominant in the script, or not, but he had very little confidence in himself. And he was convinced, or he convinced himself, that he was unattractive. But I loved him because he was kind of Mr. Everyman with an inferiority complex.
What do you feel like doing tonight? I don't know. What do you feel like doing tonight?
The next day I came out of the house and a woman walks by with 3 poodles and says, "Hi, what are we going to do tonight, Marty?" Which is one of the famous lines of the piece. And I came back with she gave me the cue. I said, "I don't know, what are we going to do tonight?" Then a garbage truck went by and the guys waved and said, "Hi, Marty, what are we going to do tonight?" I said, "I don't know, what are we going to do tonight?" When I got to the cafe, the guy gave me my tea and corn muffin and said, "What are we going to do tonight, Marty?" I said, "I don't know, what are we going to do tonight?" And this program, which was 1 hour out of 365 days, touched the loneliness almost in the entire population. And I always feel good about that.
Your kid brother got married last week, Marty.
That's right. It was a real swell affair.
Yeah. Well, Marty, when you gonna get married, huh?
And you continued to play men like Marty. Judd Fry in Oklahoma's like him, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he again can't get the girl.
Well, he's lonely like Marty was, but Judd loves pornography, which is not a crime. I like pornography at times. I was very happy to do it. The only thing that scared me was that I did my own singing. And I had studied opera for 2 years before I was going to be an actor. And I have a very good voice, but I have almost next to no ear. That's why I became an actor. You know, I'd be singing "Regita mentre presso il delirio," and I'd go on, and everybody'd stop. I said, "What'd you stop for?" He said, "Well, you changed the key." I didn't hear it.
Here he is. He's singing about his own funeral.
Poor Judd is dead, a candle lights his head. He's laying in a coffin made of wood. And folks are feeling sad, 'cause they used to treat him bad. And now they know their friend has gone for good. Candle lights his head. He's looking oh so pretty and so nice. He looks like he's asleep. It's a shame that he won't keep. But it's summer and we're running out of ice.
How unusual in a musical to have somebody imagining his own funeral?
Well, he's talked into it by Curly. Also, that type of person with an overabundance of sympathy, if you extend it to him, you can talk him into anything. You could take him any kind of imaginative trip. And I had to do the ballet with Agnes DeMille, the great choreographer. They couldn't find anybody who looked as heavy as I did from the back. And she calls me up, she says, "Hello, Rod." I said, "How you doing?" And I said, "We found him. We found him." I said, "Great, where?" She said, "Come down to stage 25 at MGM." And I walked through the door. I said, "Where is he?" She says, "You're going to do it." Oh, come on, Agnes. Can you count to 4? I said, "Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. She said, "You'll do it." And when Agnes DeMille said, "You'll do it," you did it.
1955, you made a picture that is less well known called The Big Knife, which was about Hollywood. Tell me about your character.
Well, in The Big Knife, I played the head of a studio and supposed to be very cruel and merciless and unfeeling. And months before, I had walked past the New York Health Club. And this man came out of the health club. He was tan, he had silver hair, black single-breasted mohair suit. And when I read the part, I said, "Yeah, black mohair suit, silver hair, and a tan." And I went to a department store, and I started on the first floor. And I said, "What does men's perfume mean to Stanley Hough?" Second floor, what is women's lingerie? What is stockings? What does that mean? Third floor, what do toys mean? What does that mean? The fourth floor, men's clothing. And in the clothing department, as I was leaving, I noticed a box divided into compartments. There were tie tacks. And all of a sudden, in one box, there was a silver question mark. I said, that's right, he's a question mark man. He didn't even know himself. He's got all this going on, homosexual thing or not homosexual thing. And I bought it, I wore it in the picture. It was interesting because I left my sunglasses on. And after that, everybody began to leave their sunglasses on.
I need your physical presence on the lot. I need your body, not your goodwill.
The most memorable scene, I think, is the one where Jack Palance, who plays the movie star, who you're trying to manipulate as the producer, runs towards you and you go like this. Do you remember you go like that?
Yeah. I didn't know he was going to do that. And I heard this. Runnington was scared, you know. I went like that. See, that's where your intuition works. And then my intellect said, that's good for the character. That's a 1/1,000,000th of a second. Boom.
Stay!
Ah, you're so lucky. But if this were a movie, you'd have been on the floor 10 times. Just a small token.
I'll break you. I'll break you like I... No, I'll let the law do it for me. I'll let the law do it for me this time. And you lose everything. You lose everything. This is the scandal and a disaster and a ruin.
The rest of that speech, I said, and you're through. And I was so angry, I said, you're through. The house is through. Your wife is through. All the paintings are through. You're finished. Through. Everything, you know. And they left that in.
Everything goes, John. Everything goes. The house goes. The paintings go. And you, oh, you go. Oh, no, John. Oh, no. You threw away a kingdom today.
It's one of the bitterest, most anguished films about the movie-making process and about the way people manipulate.
Well, I think one of the reasons it wasn't done over again, because Hollywood hated it, obviously.
It's too
They didn't like anybody who was in it, either.
Yeah. And at this time, you knew James Dean, and I remember once reading that you said that he became Hollywoodized. What did you mean
happened
by
there? Dean was a very good friend of mine. And he and I were alike in one way, that we didn't make friends that easily. And I was very pleased that he trusted me, and I was like his, at times, like his older brother or something. I said, why don't we have lunch? He said, all right, you come to the VIP lounge of Warner Brothers, I'll get the pass. And so I had lunch with him. And I remember he was eating this steak. And this is the thing that worried me most. He was almost more than halfway through with it, and he says to the waiter, darling, would you come in, please? I don't like this steak, I like another one. And the poor woman didn't know what to do because the steak was more than half eaten. She said, but you always eat in half. He said, this is Hollywood, sweetheart. I said, I'd like another one. And I said to myself, bonsoir, goodbye, James, goodbye. And maybe his early death might have been a blessing for him, because he was getting in with the wrong crowd, he was getting into narcotics, might have smirched everything he had done, you know. I mean, it sounds cruel to say that, but in an exaggerating way. And I was upset because I didn't think he'd fall for that crap.
You once said Hollywood is the sort of place where you have the biggest swimming pool in the world, but you go to pieces at 2 o'clock in the morning. Why do some actors survive the 2 o'clock in the morning test? Like your friend Elizabeth Taylor, for example, who's famously been a survivor. Why can some manage it and others, like Marilyn Monroe or Dean or everything, be thrown over the edge?
I didn't know Miss Monroe. I saw her 2 weeks before she died, and she was like a ghost sitting on the couch with a glass of champagne. She said, hello, my name's Marilyn Monroe. But there was nobody there. It was sad. It was really sad. Dean he was so in doubt about himself. They said he had homosexual. I don't know. I knew him very well, and he certainly didn't have any homosexual overtures or anything with me. He also was a victim of the thing I was at one time. He had this romantic, incorrect sense of being free. If I'm not free, that's going to contaminate this, it's going to contaminate my work.
And Miss Taylor, why?
Well, I know what happened with Miss Taylor was, I don't really, I have a script that I want to do. And there was a very good part in it for her. So I get to see her, and I could see immediately, because I suffer from clinical depression. And I had almost 10 years I did nothing. Lucky if I could get myself out of bed. You could smell me downstairs, and I was upstairs. You didn't shave, you don't wash, you do nothing. And she wasn't like that, but I mean, I could see she was a depressed person. I came back to have lunch with her, and one of her staff said that's the first time she's been out, except for an AIDS occasion, in over 2 years. And that's sad. Of course, right away, the yellow journalists, they were saying we're having a big romance. Well, at the time, she had to wear a brace from here to there. And if you can have a romance with somebody wearing a brace from here to there, you're a better man than I am. And there was no romance at all.
Okay, back to the movies. In 1956, you made a picture called The Harder They Fall. Do you remember that one?
Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah, and you play a crooked boxing manager.
Yeah.
And you want to get Bogart, who is a retired journalist, to come and do the PR for a big, beefy, but no hooper type boxer.
But that was the last picture, unfortunately, Bogart ever did. I admired him as an actor because he had incredible authority.
You got the wrong man for the job.
That's what I told you. Shut up, he's old enough to talk for himself, isn't he?
He could say the worst lines in the world. Like, I don't think the ketchup goes with the mayonnaise on the Fulbulgent sandwich. And you said, yeah.
You argue pretty good, and I like the money, but what happens to a clumsy kid like Toro when he has to fight a guy you can't fix?
You don't think I'm gonna let my investment get hurt, do you? Tell him, Leo.
No one gets hurt.
He was there exactly at 9 o'clock, and he left exactly at 5 o'clock. I remember they used to say, Bogey, the scene's going good. He said, what time is it? Guy said, it was in what time's the clock say? It says at 5 o'clock, right? And we became friends.
Eddie, if you help me, I'll help you.
We teased each other. We had newspapers you make with false headlines.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm waiting, and he comes, hello, Ron, how are you? He says, did you see the paper? It says here that Steiger leaves town because Brando's back. And I said, that's funny. Look at this one. It says Bogart leaves because Steiger's back. And he was great. And then the saddest moment, one day I was working. He wasn't supposed to work. And he was walking down by the studio. I said, what are you doing here? He says, well, I got to do some close-ups over. I said, why? He said, my eyes are watery. I didn't think of it. A month later, he was dead of cancer. I was so stupid. This man was shooting in pain. I'm sure at least half that film he was in pain. He never said a word about it.
Well, you'll never kick him off in this town. The boys would never swallow it.
All right, then why don't we kick him off?
California, they like freak attractions out there.
Fine, fine. All right, Leo, you'll get the tickets ready by tomorrow morning.
Deal? Nick, you've been trying to get me for 8 years. All right, you got me. It's a deal.
I have never seen why people worship him on screen, Bogart. It seems to me that there's a lack of passion or something in his performance, which means that it doesn't come across vividly to me.
Gee, I don't know. I can't judge him, really. I don't recall him having to have too much passion on most of the characters he played.
Of course.
He didn't have to really break down. He didn't have to go mad. I mean, I don't know how creative he was because he basically played himself in the situation. And a lot of actors can't even do that. But he wasn't like Charles Laughton, for instance, a creative actor who could eat a piece of chicken so you never forget it, like Henry VIII.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I haven't seen a picture where he was really challenged.
The next year after this, you made what I think is your best film, Run of the Arrow.
I'll kill you. I'll kill you. My best film? You've seen The Pawnbroker?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And you don't like this film?
Well, I think it's an adequate film. I don't think it has much depth to it. I decided like an idiot I was going to play the first Irish cowboy in the history of the West.
What am I supposed to say now to the Yankees? Welcome home, sir.
You had this man, Sammy Fuller, who has become a big thing in Europe. I'll never know why.
The director and the writer and the
Yeah,
producer.
he was the director, the writer, producer. And I go to do the first day's work with him, and I'm trying to concentrate on the scene, and I'm waiting for action, and a gun goes off. I leapt about 55 feet in the air. I said, what the hell was that? Oh, he says, I always start the scene shooting a gun off. I like to energize the actors. I said, energize your rear end. You blew my whole concentration. I don't know what I'm doing here. I can't believe what you did. And if you think that helps the actor, you're wrong, my friend. It shocks him right out of the scene. So, and another thing, I worked with him 3.5 weeks on that script and helped rewrite it with him.
Uh-huh.
When we worked on the set, you'd think I had nothing to do with it. And I don't like that either.
It's quite possible, of course, I accept completely that it was extremely difficult to work with him. But when you look at this film now, in which you play a Southerner, it's the end of the Civil War, and you cannot accept that your side has lost, and you decide to go and live with the Sioux Indians rather than march under the flag of the North. It seems that this film is still very relevant today in places where wars are over, where you have hard-bitten people who refuse to accept the new truth that people have to move forward. That's a very modern and profound theme, isn't it?
How long have you been writing for Sight and Sound? Is that what that was about, that picture?
It's in the speech.
That's what you said. You see it.
What do you see? Here's the scene
All
where
right.
you're talking to your mother.
You expected me to come home with honor? What's the matter with you, Ma? What's the matter with all of you? They came here and they tore our land, Mama. They chased us when we had no legs. They stuffed their mouths with our food when we were starving to death. Where's your pride? What's happened to all of you?
Same what happened to some of us who had to take a licking and not cry over it. You don't have to fight for the cause no more.
Mama, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do anything. I am a rebel because I want to be, not because I have to be.
Wherever you go, there's gonna be Yankees and you got to learn to live with them.
Well, maybe, but not the place I'll be.
What place?
The West, the far West.
You mean where the savages live?
Savages or no, at least they have more pride than us.
There's no hiding place for what ails you, son. We're all under one flag now.
I want to tell you something, Mother. I'll hang. I'll hang before I recognize that flag.
Maybe a broken neck is the best answer for what ails you.
Maybe, Mama. Maybe.
It's all there, what I said. This is a man whose life could be ruined because of his pride.
That's true. He's also, you're watching it from a perspective of the Irish Revolution, the independent fight of the Scots. I can understand how you could see all those things in it from your background on what's going on, you know. I didn't even remember that scene. In fact, I was surprised it was as good as it was, you know.
Yes.
But I don't know. To me, I always thought that he was highly overrated, and the picture was okay.
1956 to 58, you had a 2-year period when you didn't do very much and you went into debt. I read something like $14,000 in debt.
Oh, because I was turning things down.
Yeah. Why?
To make sure I was respected, I guess, from a psychological point of view, and I didn't see anything I wanted to do, and I held off as long as I could. And then I did. How did you know it was 14,000?
I read it somewhere.
$14,638.74.
Pardon me.
So much.
Pardon me.
So much
so inaccurate
for your research. Right?
You did theatre in this period. You did a play with Claire Bloom and subsequently married.
Rashomon.
Yeah. Married Claire Bloom. You had your first child, Anna.
Yeah, Anna Steiger. She's an opera singer, very well respected in Europe now.
Did you always want kids?
I think in the male there is, I can't speak for the female, but I was the last one in my family, and I had that crazy idea that I must continue my family's name. Don't ask me why, but it's kind of an instinctive thing, you know. I didn't want the family to terminate with my life.
Why is The Pawnbroker your favorite of your films?
Well, because it was one of the most difficult. Here's a man, Saul Nazarman, the name of the pawnbroker, who lost his family because of the Nazis. And a lot of people were obsessed. He was obsessed with the fact that somewhere he should have saved them. He felt guilty because they died and he didn't. And he never got over that, so he decides to himself, I don't want any part of society. Nothing. I cut 1/3 of my lines in that picture because I said, if I don't want to attract attention, I don't want to belong to society, then I ain't talking either. And even when somebody comes in the pawn shop and pawns something, he looks at it, he says $2. I mean, this, no discussion, he doesn't want any part of it.
I settle for $10 a pair.
$2.
My goodness! Well, this candlesticks is very high quality.
$2.
You a merciless man for sure. $2.
Do you remember the scene towards the end of the picture where the man who's been working in the pawn shop with you, Jesus, is killed?
Yes.
And you're on the streets.
Yes.
It's a very documentary scene shot by Boris Kaufman.
Well, that was something interesting because Jesus is lying there in his position, and I'm trying to convince myself that's my daughter Anna. That's who it is. Anna, my lovely Anna. And she's there. So I got that. And then one of the hardest things in movies is to hold it without losing its depth until the bloody lights are ready, till the camera's ready, till the other actor's ready, and you go crazy saying, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that. That's for the scene. That's right. It's my child there. That's right. So in the script, I'm supposed to lift my head up and scream. Months before, I had seen Picasso's painting of the burning of Guernica. Now here's a painting in grays and blacks and whites, and the people don't even look like people, they look like birds' heads with the sharp tongue sticking out, and this woman on the top of this building in the window. And it was one of the loudest screams I ever heard in my life. I put my head back, I remembered Guernica, and I said, don't make a sound. And it was twice as powerful.
The scene in The Pawnbroker that I remember intensely from when I saw it as a child is this scene, the spike. Several people have said that that scene where you press your hand on the spike is a kind of lesson in acting. What do you feel about when you watch it now?
Well, I was scared to death of that scene because there was nothing. Yes, there was one other element, which is the music, which they put in later. But basically, it was a test of my ability in a sense because there was no dialogue or anything to hide behind. It was me and the camera, and I had to convince you that I put this thing through my hand and the pain and everything. So I went berserk at home, rehearsing this thing, right? And I got it, so finally I could, you know, in fact, when I did the scene, I pressed almost a little hole to get that pain to give me a kickoff. I was so intense that I convinced you I'm putting it through my hand. I forgot I had to take it off, and this is while the camera's turning. So I remember when I'm in pain, or a lot of pain, there's a habit I have, or people have, holding your breath, right? So I was, and I got away with it.
2 years later, you made the film that finally got you an Oscar, In the Heat of the Night, where you play a Southern sheriff who accuses Sidney Poitier, a rather suave, sophisticated policeman from Pennsylvania. You accuse him of committing a local murder. Why did you do this film?
Well, it was a great script. Sidney and I had been friends for years, and basically because it was a very good part. And to me, the best scene in the picture is when they're in the house.
Well, just what do you know about insomnia?
Bourbon can't cure it.
I remember that because we were going to shoot it, and it started to rain, and of all the houses, somebody had chosen a house with a tin roof. So all you heard was, we couldn't shoot, we couldn't get the sound. So we had to wait, and we all sat outside in the car until the rain stopped. And while we were in the car, it came out that Sidney didn't like the scene the way it was. I didn't like the scene the way it was. Norman wasn't too keen on it.
Jewison, the director?
Yeah, Norman, wonderful guy, very good director. So we kind of improvised, and then we shot it. And while we were shooting, I insult him when I said, listen, boy. He said, don't call me boy. Please don't call me boy, which we had done. And then, as I'm sitting there, he's talking to me, and I'm saying, because I always tried to keep them equal. If they were hurt, they were equally hurt. You know? What the hell am I going to get out of this? I mean, he can't call me boy. It doesn't. And all of a sudden, I realized from the way he was talking to me, I said, wait a minute. Don't pity me. You understand? I don't need your pity. That matched the boy. And that balance had to be kept through the entire picture.
You married?
No.
Ever been?
No.
Ever been close to her?
Close to it.
Don't you get just a little lonely?
No lonelier than you, man.
Oh, now don't get smart, black boy. I don't need it. No pity, thank you. No, thank you.
When someone gets an Oscar, you'd think it would make the offers flood in, but come the 1970s, cinema changed. You know, filmmakers like Scorsese came along, the New York school of filmmaking, the sort of school that on the waterfront envisaged and influenced, and yet you didn't work as much.
Well, what happened to me was that I went in almost for 10 years or a decade, I went into a clinical depression, which I have to this day. I have to take my medicine in the morning and I take my medicine at night because it's a chemical imbalance of the brain. So I didn't work, for a long time. I mean, to get out of bed, almost impossible. I mean, if my ex-wife hadn't been downstairs, I would have gone to the bathroom in bed and laid in it. I hardly came out of the room.
Was this a purely chemical thing, or was it also to do with, I don't know, were you as creatively stimulated as you were?
No, this had no, I don't think it had anything to do with the profession. Really, I don't. As you get a little older, it becomes more difficult to find as many good parts. But that's the way it is in the world, But basically, I didn't even think of movies.
In the late 70s, in films like Amityville Horror, they were, frankly, that was rubbish, that film, wasn't it?
They were rubbish, but I had to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I knew they were, but then bread comes before philosophy, you know what I mean? They put sugar and beer on my face, and they let loose these flies, and I could feel them, and I could put up with it. I put up with it about a minute, and I said, that's all, but it was enough. I'll never forget that.
Coming up to date, you're working more again now. You've done the Norman Jewison picture recently, and there are several others coming out, and also in the 90s you did films like Mars Attacks. Can there ever be a time when films like On the Waterfront are made for you? Will there be parts as good as that offered to you?
No, because I'll be too old. I mean, I'm 74, and there'll come a time where that's it.
When we were outside today, people were saying, there's Rod Steiger, there's Rod Steiger. Do you like that? Most actors like that.
It all sounds like a bunch of cliches, really, because you have somebody basically called Steiger who may feel unloved. All of a sudden, people are showing respect, which he can interpret as a level of love maybe for him, or he is worth this, or he is worth that, whatever it may be. So I love it when I feel it's been honestly earned.
Rod Steiger, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you. And I want to just say to the people out there, you've been very kind to me. It's 51 years. You pay the rent, and I got bread on the table. And I love you, and I thank you for that. God bless you.
All mean and bright in the heat of the night.
All right, now let's do the real interview.